All of these things are things that may or may not happen, but if you're up at night worrying about them and being the true warrior in chief, it's going to make your company more resilient. Hi, welcome to another episode of Baktari MD. As you know, this season we're doing Crash CEO School, where we go over all of the skill sets you will need to take your organization to the next level. Today, honestly, I think it's probably one of our best topics I've done in a while. I want to talk to you about a very intangible ingredient that every CEO needs to make sure his company survives the journey into startup all the way to a mature company. And what I want to talk to you about is that every CEO has to be able to anticipate problems, possible changes, so their company will survive anything and everything. And I call this being the warrior for your company. Think of it as being the warrior-in-chief. I know that's similar to being a warrior, but I'm talking about worrying. Like, losing sleep, worrying. So when I say warrior-in-chief, I mean worrying, although you'll have to be a warrior too. But let's talk about what it means to be the warrior-in-chief. And basically, if you assume that everything in your company stops with you, every calamity happens, any things that change, you should have known, you should have anticipated, you should have come up with a backup plan. And I think a lot of times what we see is things happen to companies as they progress in their evolution in their lives. And sometimes those things that happen can hurt them badly. Sometimes it can be fatal. Sometimes they can throw them off track. So what is it about some companies that they're better prepared for these things that weren't obvious that they were coming down the road, right? So I think if you have this attitude that you are going to be the warrior-in-chief of your company and you're going to try to stay up at night metaphorically and think about what would happen if this or that, that will make your company more prone to be able to handle these things. So in this video, I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover some sample topics of what you should be worrying about theoretically, and many others that I won't be able to get to. But if you are worrying about these things or similar things, and not only worrying about it, but taking that worry and converting it into some sort of action ahead of time, you're much more likely to survive the natural turbulence that any company may go through. So let's talk about the company in general. For example, are you staying up at night and thinking, what happens if I lose a key supplier? Let's say you get a product that you resell or however you get there, or product that you need to do your business. What happens if you lose that? What happens if that supplier goes out of business? They don't want to work with you, what have you? Will your company move on? And so as the warrior-in-chief, you should be coming up and having meetings and say, listen, everybody, what are we going to do in the off chance we lose the supplier? Let's come up with 3 backup plans and let's put those backup plans into action. Let's sign deals with these other companies, maybe buy 5-10% of our stuff from them anyway, just in case we're not completely dependent on this supplier. What happens if you lose a key customer, right? So for example, there's one customer that really, when it comes to a certain segment of what you do, whether it's services or product, can you live without a certain customer? Can you live without maybe 3-4 of your key customers? And if the answer is no, are you staying up at night worrying about, hey, I think I'm going to have a meeting tomorrow morning about how we can diversify, whether we diversify more customers in the same arena, or maybe we have to slightly go into a related arena so we can diversify. What happens if the market shifts for your product or service, right? Something happens, a new technology comes out, or for whatever reason, your service is not as needed as before. Do you have a plan? And again, nobody would think of this unless you're staying up at night worrying about it. And what I have found is nobody worries like the person who owns the place or runs the place. And if you're counting on other people to have worried about those eventualities, sometimes that's the case, but sometimes they're the ones that are going to just walk into your office one day and say, we just lost our key customer, we just lost our key supplier, and it's going to take 6 months until we can replace them or whatever. And then you're going to have to really worry. So what I'm talking about, sort of anticipatory worrying. Or let's say a new competitor comes on the market with a price advantage, however you got there. Can you handle that? How much lower can a competitor go before it's going to impact you in ways that may be fatal? Are you staying up at night thinking about that? Thinking about what's going to happen if another competitor, even with the same level of service, but can give a better price? Can you survive that, right? These are all stress tests for your business if they happen. What happens if a new competitor comes in with better innovation, new technology that you don't have? So of course, again, you have to be worried. You have to stay up at night and say, maybe we should invest more in technology. We're fine, but what happens if somebody comes with better technology? So we need to be on the cutting edge of that. What happens when you reach market saturation? So you're in a market and all the people that are going to use you are using you, and you want to continue to grow. You got to think, well, how can we expand this into other markets? Again, if you're thinking about it ahead of time and solving for these when you don't have to, it'll make it a lot easier to do it when you have to, right? Let's say new things pop up like social media. You were never on social media before. Your competitors are now have their own podcast and YouTube channel, and they're getting 50,000 views every week, and you don't have anything, right? So before one of your competitors gets 100,000 views a week on their YouTube channel or on their other social media on LinkedIn, whatever, you can sit around and say, listen, none of our competitors are on social media in any sort of big way, so why should we, right? But then what happens when one of them actually does break through, right? And decides to, go on to LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, and they get a massive audience that you could, imagine how much advertising dollars you would then have to spend to get to that same market. So if one of your competitor beats you to that essentially free market, although it's not totally free because you have to pay for production, this and that, but you have to, if you're not sitting up at night worrying about it, right? Because one attitude is you can say, well, none of my competitors are really that big on social media, so why do I have to be? Well, what happens if one of them breaks out? So you got to think about that.
eNational testing makes getting a simple laboratory test as easy as ordering something online. With 3 simple steps, you can have your tests ordered for STDs, general health, allergy testing, diabetes screening, blood titers, and more. You can simply go in for testing the same day and get your results quickly to your email. eNationalTesting.com's complete healthcare panels come with easy-to-understand results at over 2,700 locations nationwide. It's time to focus on yourself. eNationalTesting.com. Easy, convenient, and tailored to your health needs.
Let's talk about things that, nobody could have expected, like a pandemic, for example, right? If nobody would have expected a pandemic, some people were better prepared to survive that. Some of it may have been luck, but actually maybe some of it was preparation. Maybe they didn't realize a pandemic was going to come, but they knew something was going to potentially happen, maybe. Or any kind of natural disaster. What happens if there's a hurricane or any kind of a flood, whatever, and the technology is out for a week or two? How will your business survive and recover from being offline for a few weeks or a couple of weeks? Do you have backup systems set up? So again, natural disasters, pandemics, what have you, the people who are better prepared, right? The people who already knew how to do Zoom meetings during the pandemic or had some idea or had already been geared up for that, probably did a little bit better than those people who had to adapt, because it's always better to have learned the techniques and knowledge you need when you don't need it than if you have to get it when you do need it. So let's talk about like even your own staff, your own, the people in your company. Are you staying up at night saying, hey, what happens if I lose this key staff person? Or what happens if in this department, we don't have enough to handle the volume of work that's going to come in given our new marketing campaign. So understanding it and anticipating and worrying about it at night or driving to work, whatever. Are you staying up at nights worrying about maybe, hey, this one person is doing really great. Let's promote them and give them more responsibilities and a bigger title because they're really moving the ball forward versus not noticing or waiting. How about managing your culture, right? I mean, you want to wake up one morning and say, oh my gosh, how did the culture in my organization get so toxic where I'm going to have to fix that? Well, the whole idea is if you could have been managing that culture all along, promoting a healthy environment where there's a lot of inclusivity and there's a lot of ability for people to express themselves and have their suggestions heard and what have you. You don't want to start doing that once the culture gets a little bit toxic. Managing your cash flow. On my last podcast, we had a whole podcast on managing your cash flow, right? So a good CEO is staying up at night worrying, hey, you know what? We're thinking about bringing on these 2 new consultants that are going to cost us this much money. How is that going to impact my cash flow? And what happens? Okay, maybe we have enough money for these 2 consultants, but we're not going to have any money left over for cash flow wise if something goes south. Understanding when to bring in or when to spend more money, when not to spend more money, when to put money aside or when to be prepared for a unexpected expense that you weren't thinking about impacting your cash flow. All of these things are things that may or may not happen, but if you're up at night worrying about them and being the true warrior-in-chief, it's going to make your company more resilient. It's going to make your company be able to survive things that you hadn't expected. No one had expected it, right? Nobody expected to lose their director of marketing because of some personal issue that came up last week, and next thing you know, you're losing a senior key person or someone who had a lot of special talents in one area or whatever it is. So really, the real job for a CEO, on top of everything else we talked about, is to stay up at nights, metaphorically, and just say, where could this go wrong? And of course, we want to highlight, where things are going right. But it's also important to talk about, where could things go wrong? What can I put in place today to address those things? So in case they go wrong, we're ready. And if they never go wrong, fine. Then you have another list of things to start thinking about that could go wrong. So always think about that. You are the warrior-in-chief. And remember, if you're not going to be the warrior-in-chief, and you're going to send that message that, hey, I'll just deal with whatever comes along, but I'm not going to sit there and have meetings anticipating things. That message is going to be sent down through the culture of the organization. And the heads of your department won't think like that, theoretically. So the more you send the message that we have to be prepared for any eventuality, whether it comes or not, whether it's high chance, low chance, medium chance, anything that could seriously damage any aspects of our company, we're going to stay up at nights and we're going to come up with plan B, C, and D in case those things happen. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. If you've stayed this long, please comment, like, and subscribe. It really helps us grow and bring you more information like this. And we will see you on the next episode of Baktari MD. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.